Hello, hello. Happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today with Lemon Seed. I am so excited for this webinar because we have a super special guest that I'm going to say is a new friend to me, and I'm calling her friend. I'm just proclaiming it. But I've gotten to spend some time with her through Lady Titans, and she's actually helping us with some things on Lemon Seed. And we're like, we have got to do a webinar on some leadership topics because so much great information to be happening and having today. And so I'm so excited to have Roslyn Fitzgibbons. Hey, Roslyn, how are you?
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Roslyn is the co-founder of Eco Plumbers and Eco University Trade School. So tons of background and experience how, you and your brother grew the business from $0 to 95 million. Like what a span. So Roslyn, tell us a little bit about your story and your background.
Yes, we started Eco in 2007, my brother and I, and it has been a wild ride, a wonderful, busy ride. But 19 years later, Eco went from about 4 employees when we started. I was answering the phones from my home, and now we have about 400 employees, 4 locations. We do 4 trades. I say 4 trades because we do sewer and excavation as its own standalone vertical. And so I've been very busy. You mentioned the trade school. One of my proudest accomplishments during my time at Eco is absolutely the university, giving back that skill trade to all of these students and people that have this skill for life. I probably cried at every graduation and just was like hugging them and just being like, I'm so happy for you, and watching them go solo. Highly recommend if anybody's in a position to open a university and teach the trades, by all means, you won't regret it. It's incredibly rewarding.
No, that is fantastic. Oh, I mean, we need to have a whole other webinar series just to talk about that and how you could implement that in your company. So, but going from 4 employees to over 400 and from $0 to 95, like you've seen everything, right? And numerous stages of the business and numerous different styles of managers and team members. And so today we're going to talk about the hidden growth ceiling in your trades company. We're going to talk a little bit about what is that growth ceiling? Why is it hidden? But how your frontline managers, what is that skill gap costing you in your margin and your attention? And that's a little bit of why it is hidden. So, Roslyn, what do you think a growth ceiling is? And like, how can contractors see if they've hit one or maybe if they're approaching their growth ceiling?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of decisions that are made inside the company are solely looking at that P&L, and that's important, right? When you start to see it, you kind of hit that with like a terminal velocity, right? You're you're selling as many memberships that are leaving, you're hiring as many people that are leaving, and you've kind of just hit this circle where you're just not breaking through, and you need those larger growth rates to really see impact. When we would have a 40% growth rate year over year, you're making those large moves that are creating that leverage, to have some of those small setbacks, but you're still seeing growth, right? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We really want to see like 4 steps forward with 1 step back, because it's going to happen naturally, right? But we need some big moves. The reason I say that this particular growth ceiling is hidden is because your manager's skill sets typically don't show up highlighted on that P&L and are blaringly obvious. And that can be really a struggle for us to understand without having good conversations and having all of those one-on-ones and annuals and quarterlies in place, that you're having good conversations with your managers, as well as your front line. It can be hard to uncover some of those. Typically, they're emotionally driven. They're found through frustration levels that are happening, but they're not always as blaringly obvious.
Yeah, because it's that intangible, that softness, and it takes very much that relationship, a lot of intentionality. And you've got to be a little bit more in communication with your team members and attuned to being willing to hear and to act on what they're saying, what you're seeing, things like that. But if you're completely out of sight, out of mind, or just like, hey, here, it's yours now. I'm stepping out. That's where I think it's oftentimes hidden, and where you can see a lot of what's the word? Expectations. Like you just aren't hitting it from both sides. And I think that's one reason how it can stay very hidden.
Yes, especially early on. You're incredibly excited to get that help or that support, right? Because you're probably been the one being the manager and wearing all those hats as the owner. And the minute you have the ability to say, I'm going to put somebody in a lead technician role, or, that first service manager is going to step up, 9 times out of 10, it's always the person that's been there the longest. It's your best friend. It's the most senior tech, and they're going to move into that spot. And you're like, yes, I'm going to have this relief. I'm ready. Take this stuff on. Now I need you doing all this. I'm paying you to be a manager, and I've given you this title, get to work. And your expectations are that they're just going to fall in place, and all this growth is going to happen because now there's somebody else in charge, and you can focus on some other part of the business. And you will find out quickly that if we aren't training them and setting them up to be successful in those roles, particularly when they come from the field and into these managerial positions, that's where we're going to see that skill gap. And that's where we have to be incredibly mindful that we are exploring what that means. And so even if we haven't fully assessed them as like, are they the right person to be in the spot? In an ideal world, that's where you would start, right? Are they good? Are they the avatar that I need to be in a managerial position? We don't always have that luxury. We typically are like I said, next man up, woman up, let's go. You're taking the seat, and you haven't really thought through, hey, how do they communicate? What's their communication styles? Do they understand time management? Are they capable of doing all these things that we would normally hire from the outside and be looking for? We give more leniency, and we want the relief of having the help. And so we hand that role off pretty quickly.
No, for sure. We see it all the time, and we've been guilty of it too. Just, again, you kind of do it from necessity, just hiring from within. And again, you're just willing, like, they've been here the longest. They've been with me since the beginning, maybe even. But we kind of say this all the time, is like, just because you're the best shortstop, just because you're the best technician or the best CSR does not necessarily mean that you need to be the coach, because it's a completely different skill set. And honestly, like, you actually get to do a lot less of what it was that you were really good at. And I always think about the John Maxwell quote that says, don't send your ducks to Eagle school. So sometimes they're the best duck and they're great at being a duck, but like it's a totally different ball game. It's a totally different animal to be in leadership. And so you're saying that's somewhat was what's hidden in your profit margin and your retention, is because we're putting these people maybe that necessarily shouldn't be there, or we're not giving them the right tools and training to help them be in that position. Right?
Yes. Absolutely. And I think that every one of those individuals is probably deserving of that opportunity to move into that role if it's what they truly want. But what we need to do then is set them up to be successful and understand where their limitations are. Have onboarding programs where we're allowing them to have that runway, that 30, 60, 90 of getting up to speed, and those expectations being clearly set, so we can say, are you getting it? Do you understand it? Do you have the capacity to do this? And let's have a really good conversation along the way so that our relationship isn't damaged. Because if they were your best tech and they're not your best manager, where do we want them to go? Right back to being your best tech. And we want that to be a very comfortable transition. And so setting expectations that, like, hey, let's do this and try it, but let's always know that you can go right back to sales or right back to installing if it isn't. And let's ensure we maintain a good relationship. It doesn't end up in this one where we're parting ways because it didn't work. Now, we're both losing. But that training plan has to be put in place. And a lot of the times as owners, we just don't even know what that is, right? We're like, oh, cool, okay. Of course I want them to do well, but like, I don't even know what to teach them to do it well. Usually you're like, I'm learning myself. I'm trying to.
Exactly. There was no playbook for us, in figuring it out.
Yeah. So we want to set them up with those tools when they switch over. And what I'll say is the common sentence I put out there, a lot of my posts and my advertising for the Manager Builder Workshop is, we don't want to skip the basics and expect greatness. And the reason behind that is we hear a lot of this leadership mentality, right? You want to be a leader, put them in leadership training and coaching and all this. And we think of managers like this dirty word, right? Don't be a manager, be a leader. And you're like, yeah, but in general, managerial skills are what are needed at the foundation to fundamentally be able to do that role. And, we call those executive function, which is, do you understand time management? Do you understand how to read the P&L? All these types of things that are just kind of general functionality get skipped. And we jump right into this other mindset, leadership coaching. And we forget that they need those types of skills as well. And so while I love leadership training, I've coached it for years, I've been part of it, built playbooks around it. It is absolutely needed. Let's just make sure that we hit the basics first before we expect them to be able to move on. Like, let's do 101, right? Before we move on to 102 and get them set up for success.
So let's talk a little bit. So like, if you do skip the basics and you kind of go right into that greatness, like what is that gap like actually costing you in your business? Because again, it's so easy, like just figure it out. But if we're ignoring that part, what is the true cost to that?
Typically it's retention because there is so much misalignment with what actually needs to be happening when they don't have the time. We're ending up in efficiency deficits. So then you're back into margin and profit because they don't have the time. They don't know what they're looking at. They don't know how to read the P&L. They're not really comfortable with understanding how to audit and job cost. And those are all things that they have to know. But at the very basics, they need to understand your company's policies and expectations. They need to know how to align with what your annual plan is. And so that gap there is, hey, we have all these things we want to accomplish for the year as a company. We usually have an annual plan or something in our mind. And if we haven't presented it to them, they don't know. So we should be presenting to them what the annual plan looks like. But now they have to understand that I'm no longer just this individual contributor. I have to contribute in a very different way. And that is that my outcomes are now ultimately all of my team's outcomes. And how do I transition that mindset to what I'm responsible for being everybody else? And my time is now their time. And again, like I said, that annual alignment is so important. And what are you trying to accomplish and what role do they play in it? How do they know how to be proactively moving initiatives, if you call them rocks, projects that are going on in your company? They have not had to be in that mind frame to be moving the needle on some training program or initiative inside, a moving company. And we need to give them those skills and that time to be like, okay, how do I proactively approach, my hiring? The company wants to grow X. I need 15 techs by the end of this year. Do they know what that budget even looks like? Do they know when they need to hire them by? Do they know how long it typically even takes you from the time you open an acquisition until the time they're in the truck? Are they thinking about a whole 90-day stretch? If you need that person in April, we can't, open the ad in March. We've got to open it in January because it's typically a 90-day onboarding. We just need to get that mentality switch around some of these skills.
Well, no, and I think you're so right. Like sometimes as owners, you can be like, oh, like, why don't they get it? Like, why can't they just see what I see? Like, why can't they see the big picture? In reality, you have to be like super transparent to share the big picture. Like you want them to see what you see, like show them what you see, show them the real problem, or show them like how, hey, you got to think beyond just your department and like what you're used to, but like, hey, here's how it affects every other department. And like you said, in your annual planning, transparency just builds trust ultimately. And so like, you've got to have a lot of trust with each other. But if you want them to think like you think, you've got to share some of those hardships. You got to share those big pictures and stuff. And sometimes we can be so eager to either like hang on to it, like we don't want to share it, or then two, it's just like out of sight, out of mind. Like how do you not know that big picture? But it takes tremendous intentionality to share that transparency so that they can see that and start to have their eyes opened in a different way.
Yes. The feedback from my last class the owner was on at the end, and she said, one of the biggest takeaways that I have is how much I learned that I wasn't providing them to be successful. And one of those was the annual plan, that they just didn't have that clear picture. And it's not that they didn't want to, it just wasn't kind of ultimately thought about, that like we really need to be translating this down into each department. And that's what we're doing. We're saying, go get this information and come back with it. I want you to know what the company wants. What do they want for staffing? What do they want? And, start these conversations so that as a manager, you're being proactive to what the company's growth is going to be for that year. And like I said, looking at those budgets and being a part of driving it, because, how are we all going to row in the same direction if we don't even know what direction we're rowing in, right? And so we have to be very clear with them that, like, we don't want them going off working on things that don't align with where we're trying to go. And so maybe they're working away like crazy, but they're
rowing so good. Yeah.
But they're just way off working on stuff that you're like, why are you working on that? We don't need to be working on that right now. Or they're trying to do things that you've already tried. And, that inefficiency can be creating that pattern where they're rediscovering and stuff that you've already have, because again, it's tough to always share everything, right, that you already know, and you've maybe kept up here and you don't have it in processes. It's just, always kind of been the way you've done it. And so we need to get them aligned with the company policies and processes, and what types of things do they need to know. A big one is hiring and onboarding, and how do you interview? Most of our managers have not been through best practices for interviewing and understand what is actually considered the state law or, federal law when it comes to hiring employees. And how you can go about interviewing, and what you can ask and you can't ask. And so we touch on that and make sure that we're not getting ourselves into any, bad situations. The big one, I think, that I love talking to them about is how they manage their time, and just being really efficient and getting their eyes to kind of open up into that proactive way of approaching your week. And so, if you're an individual who is constantly fighting the fires and you're always saying, I just don't have time. I just don't have time. Yes, I want to do one-on-ones, but I don't have time. We spend an entire session just looking at what are all the things you need to do as a manager, and how are we expected to get them done, and when is the right time to get them done. And if it's something that's only done weekly, what's the best time of day, and really getting them to just stop and think about, well, I probably shouldn't work on that until Thursdays in the afternoon, because that's when the report comes out. And so why do I try to look at it on Monday mornings when, all those types of nuances that we get them thinking about, to actually create a nice framework that they can kind of work inside, not minute by minute of every day, because that's nobody's reality, but enough to where it can keep them coming back to this routine that can help them feel a little bit more set up for the week, versus just going with the flow, which is not going to land us anywhere good.
No, you're right. Like we totally have to provide that for them. And like you said, those clear expectations, and like the things that we've already learned and discovered of, like, hey, here's how you have to set up your day and set up your week and things like that. And, we've seen with some of our own teams, like, someone gets promoted to leadership, and they might, if we don't coach them in the right way, they might think, okay, leadership is just, how can I help all my team members? And by help ends up doing, how can I do all of their jobs, or remove any obstacles and just put it only on myself? When in reality, we're not making those team members any bit better, because we've just removed everything hard from them. And like, being a leader doesn't necessarily mean that you take it all on personally yourself, but like, how do you set up those structures and those frameworks? And so it takes us as the owners or top tier leadership to guide and to provide that insight and that clear path, because ultimately, if we don't, we will set them up for failure, whether that's through burnout, or they just hate the job, or they're truly failing at it, or they're struggling so much that then the team doesn't respect them for it. Like there's so many different ways of how, if we are skipping those basics, we will ultimately set them up for failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right, it's going to lead to burnout, and it's going to show up in the team. And that's what leads to the turnover. They're just looking at this manager who can't handle it, is constantly frustrated and overwhelmed and irritated, and, constantly kind of behind the ball on everything. It does create a lack of respect. And you don't want that for them. And so, they might be really great in other areas.
Right.
And so that's another thing to think about too. There's no right or wrong answer for it. It's basically what works best for your business. And the understanding that you have is, what are your non-negotiables when somebody's in management that you need them to know and you want them to know? The managerial basics that I teach on, absolutely, they should know. But if they're not the best at the computer and a lot of those admin type skills, are you willing to sacrifice that for the fact that they know everything about safety, everything about shoring boards and digging, and you name it, they've got it covered, and they know how to look at a job site and all those things? Are you willing to say, okay, well, I'm okay with that. They're not as great at time cards and timekeeping and some of those administrative things, and I do have an office manager, and I'm comfortable with that being separate and it's handled by, a trade admin in my company? Or are you like, no, you have to do all parts and you've got to, be it all, which is tough. I mean, you're looking for a unicorn at that point. But some managers, once they get to a certain point and are trained up, they can take on more. But in the beginning, we've got to really make sure that we're, like I said, creating that runway that we need them, that learning curve of things that we actually need them to know. And a lot of the times that's the hiring and onboarding, because they're going to say, well, when you hired me, I just was thrown in a truck and got to it, right? That's, or I just rode around with somebody until they were like, okay, we need you on a different job. And then all of a sudden you're solo. Where typically we are at the growth that you're at, if you've got an actual manager in place, your expectations are, I want a really good onboarding and training program. I need all these new technicians to be set up and ready to go and understand all these policies and Service Titan and on your iPad and all these other functionalities. And they're going, I've never built an onboarding plan. I never even went through one.
I didn't have an onboarding plan.
You're like, now you want me to make one. And so we talk about what that looks like and what would you include and how would you set them up to be successful. We give the tools that they can use to create this scheduled onboarding and then ongoing training. Again, time management, where are they fitting it in? How are they having team meetings? How are they having huddles? What are they even training on? A lot of the time is they're like, we talk about looking at the numbers. How are you using data to know what to train on and create your flywheel? And, repeat, hit safety, hit policy, hit customer service. How are you, kind of continuously going through this? But if they don't have the numbers or know to where to even look to find out what their recall rates are and what callbacks they're having to be able to start training on that, we get them thinking about, okay, well, where are you looking for these numbers? How often are you looking at them? What's your cadence for auditing customer service or, basically your presentation, the summary of findings, and learning to see how many options people are giving. And they're just like, I don't have time to look for all that stuff. And it's like, you don't, but you don't have time not to, because ultimately these are the things that are going to free you up and create a successful team. Especially with the huddles, getting people in the routine for the huddle or like the one-on-ones is always kind of that, I just don't have time. I can't get to that. And we have to reframe our mindset that is ultimately your role in these great conversations and these relationships, and understanding what your team needs from you is going to create that success.
No, for sure. And we can all be guilty, myself included, of, I'll just push the one-on-one to next week, or like, just skip it because like I'm taking care of the customer, and like that's the most important thing. But like, honestly, you have to reframe it of like, hey, if I don't have a team, it doesn't matter, because then I can't take care of a customer at all. So like, you still have to prioritize that time. And, you talked a lot about like the onboarding and, ultimately like employee retention and things like that. And that's all like ties into your culture. And I think that's one of those gaps that we're talking about in this manager skill gap. That culture piece can be really missing and can hit your bottom line because that retention isn't there and stuff. And so tell me a little bit about how, like, if you aren't, investing in your leaders the right way, like how does that ultimately like affect your culture?
Well, when we are missing the boat, and we typically, like we said, we skip over it, right? We do all this frontline training and they get all this stuff. Your manager is now lacking in these skills. And then ultimately that is going to trickle down. And again, that frustration level of the manager not being able to handle things or know how to do things correctly for their employee. Time off. Do they know how to manage what your policies are? Are they capable of capacity planning? Do they know their capacity numbers, right? And say, I know that I can only have X amount of technicians off on Black Friday to hit budget still. I mean, if they're not looking at those types of things, then we have these issues with people getting upset over who gets off and who doesn't get off, and who's denied, and or people that are taking more time off than they're supposed to, and all types of things like that just start creating these, eroding factors in the culture. And again, do they know how to reward and recognize outside of just revenue? We spend a little section on that. It's like, it's not all about the numbers. Let's make sure every day that we're looking for something that we can recognize in the huddle the next morning that is going beyond the numbers. It's not always the top revenue producer. Yes, that's great. We want to call that out, but let's call out percentage wins. Where has somebody incrementally done better than they did previously and are training up or winning? Where did somebody go above and beyond for a customer? When did they generously give? All those little things that make it. When did they have like that beautiful install, that tank list that just looks like, oh my gosh, amazing. Everything is, plumb, level, straight. It's like the prettiest thing. Like all those other things that we need to recognize, right? And even for call center and dispatch, there's a whole other functionalities in the business that need to be recognized as well. And we want to find those ways to be ensuring that we are promoting a good culture. Also inside culture, I push this one maybe because of my decades in HR, but is the stay interviews and how important it is to have that additional contact point. And I challenge the managers to go and find somebody else in the company that can be doing them for them, because it's not you. It needs to be somebody else. And having those conversations with individuals was something that was incredibly rewarding for me, because I hired them and then I wanted to see how they were doing. And then I wanted to know what else we could do, particularly with my role in the company and having been a co-founder. I wanted the best experience possible for them. And so when you hit that 90-day mark or even past that, you want to be checking in and just knowing like, hey, what's one thing I could do for you today that would make your work life better? And you will get just the smallest little things that you can do. A lot of the times, I say it kind of joking, but it's not. I mean, the technicians would just be like, that camouflage hat you gave to Jeff, can I have one? And I'm like, absolutely. I will. If that is what today is going to make your day, I've got hats. What do you want? Some pants? You need new pants? All those types of little things. And that's just what makes a difference. But if you don't ask and you don't give them the opportunity to just, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this, or I've, had some concerns here, they might be quick wins, but you've got to take the time to do it and ask.
And I would say you've got to ask, but then also like you've got to be willing to hear the feedback and like implement some of those changes if necessary. So like I remember, we sent out a survey one time after we had done an employee retreat, and we asked about the food, and they said they didn't like the food. I'm like, how could you not like? How dare they say they didn't like the food? But we asked, and they gave us the feed. So like we've got to be willing, okay, we don't need to do that type of food anymore. Noted, we won't do that again. But like we have two choices. Like we could be offended. You didn't like my cooking. I'm so sorry. Like rude. Or okay, we need to do something different for next time. So like you do have to have a plan in place. So like don't just ask for the sake of asking and getting the feedback, or to prove a point of how right I am and how wrong they are. They didn't see everything that went behind to make that food, but you've got to have a relatively humility, a humble spirit to be able to implement some of those things. So like, if you're not willing to do that, or if you're like, I'm right, this is the best way, then don't ask. Like it can almost do more harm than good. Of the team told you like, hey, we expressed this, but then you didn't do anything about it. Like you've got to be able to be willing to implement some of the things that they say from their survey. And like you said, it can be very just like small ways a lot of times.
Yes, it is. It can be very small. You're right. But you've got to be ready and willing to invest in the change and put your ego aside and be like, yeah, we need to change and be ready to make some of those changes.
Are there any other like practical ways of how you can better support your frontline managers?
Better ways you can practically
I mean,
support
I
them.
think the stay interviews are great. Highlighting those eroding factors, giving them the time and stuff. But are there any other like small practical way? And you just like you said, like being super intentional to just shout out those small things, and it doesn't always have to be just numbers. I think those are all great ways. But I didn't know if you had any other little small practical ways.
Small practical ways. Let's see. Well, again, tools, making sure they have the tools that they can use and be successful with. Um, Everything trickles down. So again, everything that we're trying to teach them, you have to be good at as well. And so you need to be doing your one-on-ones and hearing what they need and the support that they need. So at its simplest form, if we're asking them to do one-on-ones, you need to be doing yours with
Yeah.
them and taking that same feedback, sticking with the quarterlies and the annuals, however you have it set up. I coach one-on-ones, quarterlies, and annuals. I think it's a wonderful way to go about it. And then giving them budgets is a great way to allow them the opportunity to reward and recognize. And so mapping out a small, $500 a month or something, whatever you can afford inside your business model, say, hey, this is discretionary for you to buy lunch, take somebody out, offer a gift card, whatever it might be that you need so that you can keep your company going. So without, or your department going without having to constantly feel like you need to come and ask, or, it's an issue. It's like, hey, I want you recognizing your team and, bring them out pizza, or, it's a hot day, make sure you're buying Gatorades and showing up and just being there and being present and following that kind of like no man left behind mentality. Right. And it's like, if they're out, you're available and showing up for your team.
I love that built-in budget already that they know they can use at their own discretion. And like that might be something that owners can easily overlook. Like, hey, my manager came to me and asked, hey, can I spend $100 on pizza today? And like you're gonna be like, yes. And you're like, I've never told them no. But they might also feel awkward if they're always having to ask, like, can I ask to spend pizza today? Can I ask to bring Gatorade? Da, da, da. Like they might be more hesitant to do it. And you might be in the opposite trend of like, well, I've never told you no. Like, why is it a big deal for you to ask? But if you just go ahead and like remove that barrier that could be a barrier for them, give them a built-in budget, tell them like, I expect you to spend this. Like, don't just try to save it to save our bottom line, but like, I expect you to spend this. It is important and stuff. And so I think that's a great practical way, and it empowers them, in tons of different ways. So I love that one. Okay. One question. So I think there's tons of practical ways, and I think we're probably all thinking about like at least one manager that we can be increasing this and doing a lot of things better with them. But when you're looking to build managers at scale, so like what you guys have done from 0 to 95 million, there's different layers to it. So what does building managers at scale actually look like? And is it the same formula, or is there some different things that you have to do when you're really looking to go to that next level?
Yeah, so a big one for us is was getting communication in play. So as you are scaling, you have to realize very quickly that you've got all these extra layers and communication is going to crumble quickly. And so we started doing town halls, and then town halls were done every quarter, and we were, keeping people engaged with what was going on in the company, and all the managers would come in. Everybody in any sort of management role, didn't matter if you had people under you, if your title said manager or you were doing something that managed anything, you were in there so you could hear what was going on. And so, but then town halls led into what we called manager mixers. I started those about 3 or 4 years ago, and those ended up being monthly. And so once a month for 3 hours, we pull the managers out. And you are, outside of the business for 3 hours once a month, and you are trained on something new. We would roll out any policies that are happening, do leadership training if they're, leadership training. And to be frank, that's kind of where I led into understanding a little bit more about the managerial gap, because when we were teaching leadership training, I kind of had my own ha-ha moment. And I was like, wow, we are really jumping over this secondary phase from being a self-starter and a, emerging leader to being a manager. And then we're trying to do leadership training. And I kind of was like, this is important. We're skipping over a lot of stuff that as HR, I deal with on a daily basis, where I'm like, why don't you know the policy? Why did you let them have off all those extra days? What are you doing? We can't do that. What did you say to them? All those types of things. And that's kind of where it stemmed from. I was like, we ourselves were kind of missing a little bit of that, and I understood that they needed it. But I would say pulling them aside, like I said, having their own time to keep communication as tight as you possibly can, especially if you're at a growth stage where you have multiple locations, siloing departments, bring everybody together, get that time where they are hearing the same message consistently. You should be having your Monday morning company meeting where everybody's managers are on, getting that, 20, 30 minutes that gets them ready for the week. They know what's happening. But that 3 hours was really just dedicated to them training. And if you were from another location, you had to drive to it. Fortunately, ours are all, close enough within drivable hour and a half to come. I think my last manager mixer I hosted had about 40 managers at it. And that's all people from different locations wearing that hat. But it's important that keep that communication.
No, for sure. And I love, as you're scaling, different levels, different devils, and to where you've got to address some of these different things. And like, at face value, that might seem like, oh my gosh, I can't take all the managers out for 3 hours once a month. Like that might seem like crazy to some people or like at face value. But when you look at, and again, how we've been talking about this whole time, is that hidden growth ceiling. And so like, if you're not doing these things, you will hit that ceiling, and it might not be super obvious or super apparent, but you have to be super intentional to carve out that time, because, and sometimes I know it could probably even be intimidating, like, what are we even going to talk about? Like, what are we going to talk about for 3 hours? But like, no, when the team is all there together and they have that space, and where they know their ideas and their opinions are welcome, like, there will be things to talk about and to discuss. And I think it's also super important how you say, like, everyone is getting the same message. So, again, if it's, well, I meet with them and then I meet with them and then I meet with that location and then that department, it's like the telephone game, like to where like, maybe you got the, but like, there's definitely the different nuances, and like, not every detail was completely relayed and stuff. And so, if you want to make sure that like everyone is getting the same message, like, make sure they're getting the same message, like hearing it from you or from that manager, but everyone heard at the same time, same information. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, you make a great point. Initially, you might think, what will I talk about for 3 hours? But once you start actually planning it out and you're like, oh, we could go over that. We need to go over that. We're rolling out new finance. We better talk about the new finance program. We're changing something with the memberships. Let's make sure everybody's clear and how they are going to handle the membership. There are so many things that you're like, we need to know this, get marketing up there to talk about upcoming marketing campaigns that are going on, get people understanding what the spend is so that they have a reality of like, hey, this is how much we're spending on the marketing and this is what it's going to do. And this is the areas we're going to be in, be listening for this radio ad. Like, how are we ensuring that everybody knows that type of stuff? If it's technology, get IT up there, have them talking about stuff that's being rolled out. Managers need to know what's going on. If you're on ServiceTitan, a lot of people are, but any of your CRMs, what's the new rollout? What's changing? What should we be looking for? HR all the time. We could talk forever. I mean, you need to fill a spot, get our HR in there to talk, because they will be like, yep, we're going to talk about this. And, there's so much that we should be covering.
No, that's awesome. Well, I have loved every single thing we've been talking about, but guys, we also want to hear from you. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the chat. And I see we have one from James. So he was talking about when we were doing the stay interviews, you said it doesn't need to be you. And so he says, it shouldn't be the manager that does the stay interviews, or do you mean the manager who is also the owner? Or are you referring to this interviewer being on a non-manager period? So should it be someone different who is their manager, whether you're the manager and also the owner? Who do you think should be doing those stay interviews?
It's anybody that is not the direct manager. So you should already be having a one-on-one and a quarterly. So you're already having that conversation. We need the third party. We need it to be, if you have an HR representative, if you have an office manager, if you have a leader in your business, that if you're the owner and the manager, you might want to look for a third party company to come in and just talk and chit chat. I mean, you can call me, I'll call your people, we can chit chat. But you don't want it to be you, is just basically what it is. If you are their direct manager, it's not you. It's got to be somebody else. And if you have HR, that's a great place because they've built a relationship with them during hiring and recruiting. And it is intentional that they're checking in. They should be checking in and making sure everything that they should be provided has been fulfilled.
Because it allows them, they can oftentimes be more honest, and maybe they do have some feedback to actually give, but like they don't want to say that maybe directly to your face or, whatever it might be. It just helps kind of remove a barrier. And again, you've created a safe space where they can share openly and freely. And then also sometimes if it might be something super, the HR can kind of help. How do I deliver this message to this manager of improvement and things like that? So always a third party is a lot better, just from the employee's perspective and the manager's perspective. They can kind of be that middle gap and middle bridge.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you, James. Any other questions, feel free to drop it down in the chat there. But Roslyn, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, because you've talked a lot about when you're doing your coaching and when you're doing this. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Moxie Project and Productivity Coaching. That's your current company and your main gig right now, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So as our companies grow and scale and we learn that we have things to offer, we were very fortunate to have a lot of great people in our lives that shared. And so I just feel like it's a little bit about my time to give back and share and help other companies build. I'm pretty passionate about processes and productivity and improvement. And like you've heard me speak, I'm very passionate about these managers being set up for success and giving them that chance that they need to shine. But I decided it was time to do some coaching and consulting. And so Moxie was born. Moxie is about bringing that skill, creativity, know-how, fortitude to any situation. And that's what I want people to understand, is that whatever it is, you've just got to bring your Moxie, because we're going to get through it. Tough situations are always ahead of us, but how we approach them is what matters, and going at it with that right mindset. So I've been really fortunate to have some great clients and teach a lot of great managers over the last, couple months and years or so here doing it. Looking forward to seeing where it goes for me and being in the industry and helping more companies build.
Awesome. Well, I know I've definitely gotten so much just from this conversation, and others even more. We've got a question here from Robin. What kind of cadence for stay interviews? Should managers still handle 90-day and annual reviews? She had to step away for just a minute, but what is that cadence? More frequently, 90 and 1 year? Is that good? What's the cadence?
Your 90 days is great. You should definitely do it at 90 days. Anything after that, yes, your manager should still handle the annual reviews. That's on their plate to do. Anything outside of that, you could do kind of in that like peppering, where you're like looking for maybe some top performer that you want to make sure is still happy. So it's like, oh, let me check in just because they're doing really good. Let me make sure that they are actually good on the inside, and we're not going to jump ship for, a couple bucks. Let's go ensure that they're happy. So you can find anybody like that. If you see anybody that's starting to kind of disengage, maybe they've started to kind of, the term quiet quit, and you're like, what's going on with them? And so you have to really be kind of observing. But I think most importantly, get in the 90-day habit, because that's when you're going to see the most of your initial turnover, where expectations were not what they expected. Things didn't get followed through on potentially. They had a different reality of what they thought was going to happen, which is why I could go down a whole nother path about doing ride and decides and why you should be doing reality, and showing everybody what the job entails. Get them in your business. Don't be afraid. Open the doors. Come see us. Come walk the shop. come walk around, see what we have going on, talk to my people. You shouldn't have anything to hide. We always had everybody come in and walk through the whole building, and I would tour them around and show them what was going on. Call center, dispatch, let them come and sit next to somebody. You want them seeing what the job entails. You will have a lot of high turnover in your call center and dispatch if they are not fully prepared for what they are getting into, because we all know we are not Verizon. We are not the credit card company. This is a whole nother ball game that they are getting into. And so you want them to sit and be like, do you see what you would be doing? You are going to have to like really learn this platform and really understand you're going to know more about plumbing or HVAC than you ever thought you would know. Right. And so they have to be prepared, because you will have a good bit of turnover in particularly call center if it's not what they thought. So give them that.
I didn't know people were going to be rude to me on the phone, like they have to see some of those unhappy calls sometimes, and really angry, frustrated people because they're hot or their house is leaking and stuff. But no, I love that. And like, I love letting them like tour your office and do ride-alongs and stuff. And again, I think if you have nothing to hide, if you're transparent, but also if you've done a great job, and like literally everyone from the building and the walls to all of your team members is exuding your culture, that in itself is an attracting factor to where not everything boils down to just money. Sometimes people are looking for a true home. They're looking for a place that they can really grow a career. And so when you can kind of unveil the curtain and show all that beyond just like, here's the job description, here's the pay, yes or no, when you can really show that, that's what people can also really buy into. And so I love that, like, do it from right off the bat. Don't leave it to where after, everything's all settled and stuff. Show it from the very beginning.
Yeah. Come in. Do you want to be here? People will vet themselves out.
Right.
Or they will be all in. It's literally one or the other. Like you said, they will be there and be like, I want to be here. This is not what I expected. Oh my gosh, the graphics, if you are a company that has, and the attitude and the culture and the people and the energy. And, we always had all these big TVs up and all the numbers, and people are like, oh my gosh, I want to be here. Right. This is great.
Yeah.
Or they vet themselves out and they're like, this isn't for me. I wasn't expecting to be held to this standard.
Right.
Not for me. I don't want to be here. Right. And same thing with Ride and Decides, have them come in and ride with one of your, company centric techs for a little while and see how did they interact with the customers? What type of questions did they ask somebody that they believe is just a peer? You'll learn a lot, but then it gives them an opportunity to be like, this is what your day's going to look like. We have a standard. We do summary of findings. We check in, we check out, we do all the close things. Like, we've got a standard that we hold, and are you willing, to meet that standard before they even move forward with the interview process?
Awesome. Well, Roslyn, thank you so much. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, or maybe they wanted to talk more one-on-one about how you can help in leadership and HR training and building a university, how could people actually get a hold of you?
Yeah, awesome. It's Roslyn, ROSLYN at bringyourmoxie.com. Bring Your Moxie on Facebook and hashtag Bring Your Moxie on Instagram. And so, but you can email me directly. I'm quick to respond and would love to set up time to chat with any of you. And anybody that was on or registered today, you're going to get my quick 10-question assessment that you can give to your managers to see where they stand. And so if you feel like they are not where you would like them to be, you can reach out to me and we can chit chat about getting them into my next class.
Yes. Awesome. You definitely brought the Moxie today. So thank you so much. And like Roslyn said, we will be sending out this recording. It'll also be posted to our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and rewatch anything, share with a team member, and then be watching for those emails so that you can see that assessment that you can give to your managers. So as always, this is powered by Lemon Seed Marketing. We are your full service branding and marketing CMO. We help you build a marketing strategy, help you implement your budget, how to push employer tactics, come up with creative offers. And so if that is anything that you are looking for, needing help, feel free to reach out to Lemon Seed. You can go to hello at lemonseedmarketing.com to shoot us an email, or lemonseedmarketing.com to just check us out. So Roslyn, thank you so much for your time today, and we will be talking more soon. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.